Talofa lava, this is Pacific Waves from RNZ Pacific. I'm Susanna Suisuki. Coming up,
we are ready for dialogue. We are ready to find a solution.
The French ambassador to the Pacific makes a plea for dialogue. Also, PNG's opposition is confident votes will go ahead. And
unfortunately, elements of the police force are not only incompetent but also corrupt.
Fiji's military say the government is all talk and no action. The French ambassador to the Pacific has condemned violence in New Caledonia, calling it an unacceptable means to an end. Veronique Roger-Lacan says you cannot justify deadly protests just because one group fails to use their political power to convince the Assembly and the Senate against their controversial constitutional reform. Ms. Roger-Lacan spoke to Lydia Lewis from Paris after representing France at a United Nations decolonisation seminar. She calls for peace.
Since I arrived in New Caledonia in October last, I've been banging on their door, asking for discussions and coordination and cooperation. And it seems that those guys do not want to cooperate nor to coordinate. My job is not anything, it doesn't have anything to do with the institutional future of New Caledonia. My job is, given the current framework, which is New Caledonia after the third referenda being a part of the French Republic, is to implement as much as possible the law and implement it to the benefit of New Caledonia, to the benefit of French Polynesia. And this benefit to those territories would benefit everyone in the Pacific, also Australia, New Zealand, all the members of the Pacific Islands Forum. This is what everyone has to understand, that what we want to do, what the French state want to do, is in the interest of the stability and peace and prosperity of the Pacific. It's not anything that the French state imposes. It is something that the Caledonians have chosen through democratic scrutiny votes. And if the democracy in New Caledonia has decided that this is the way it has to be, we cannot impose on 60% of the population in New Caledonia something that the others do not want. And on that basis, we are ready for dialogue. We are ready to find a solution, but it should not be imposed through violence, because this violence has been really amazingly unacceptable.
Tell me about what happened in Caracas and about the conference that you attended.
It was, so you know that the United Nations have established a committee on decolonization by two resolutions, Resolution 1514 and Resolution 1541 of 1960, that provide a framework for the UN to deal with decolonization issues. The principle is that there should remain no colony in the world starting from those resolutions. This same principle is enshrined in the French Constitution. The right to self-determination is a constitutional principle in the French Constitution as much as it is in the UN Charter. So every year, the United Nations have some type of cycle which starts by a seminar of preparation of the Committee on Decolonization. The seminar is held either in the Pacific or in the Caribbean. This time it was in the Caribbean. Then the committee itself is held in New York in June. So I was representing this year France at the seminar for the preparation of the C24 meeting, and this seminar was taking place in Caracas.
And what did you submit on behalf of France?
So on the C24 agenda, there are 17 territories, and what they call in the UN terminology, they are called the non-self-governing territories, meaning territories under administration of other administering powers. 17, 10 are under UK administration. 2, New Caledonia and French Polynesia are under French administration. And 3, Guam and 2 others are under US administration. France is the only administering power who has ever seated in this committee and discussed with the members of the committee and interacted with the local executive powers like New Caledonia.
There have been calls from various groups for a UN delegation to go to New Caledonia. What is the latest on that?
The C24 has been in New Caledonia many times at the request of the New Caledonia government, at the request of the French authorities, just on their own, also to monitor the 3 referenda. So it's a long-lasting cooperation history between the C24, the local government of New Caledonia, and the French state. And the calls for involvement of the C24 are coming from all parties. We have invited the C24 to come again whenever they wish. And the various parties also, this time in Caracas, called for the C24 to come.
Has there been a response?
From my own understanding and feeling of the debates in the committee heard the voices of everyone. So they heard the voices of the independentists. The New Caledonia government was represented by Michael Forrest. I want to insist on the fact that the government of New Caledonia is a collegial government representing all parties in New Caledonia. Whether Michael Forrest represented the views of a collegial government in this meeting, I'm not sure. I'm asking the question. It will be up to all of them to respond. He made a statement and calling for T24 mission. Then there was a representative of the Flinks also calling for this type of mission. Then there were 5 representatives of the Loyalists, and they all made the case of the fact that the 3rd referenda had, in compliance with the 2 UN General Assembly resolutions, determined the future status of New Caledonia. And they didn't call for a UN mission because they said that the UN had monitored the 3 referenda, had monitored anything possible in New Caledonia, and that everything was decided now. And we just had to implement what was decided through the 3 referenda. As a representative of the French state, I made the case on the fact that we had always been the only administrating power in the C24 to sit in the C24 and to negotiate and to cooperate with the C24. The United States, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom never did that. That's one. Second, that we had welcomed the C24 all the way in New Caledonia, in Paris, and vice versa. We would also go to New York to discuss with the C24. And that we had called for a dialogue always, and that it was unfortunate that one single party, the Caledonian Union, slammed the door of negotiations in September, whereas everything was open. Everything is for negotiation and discussion and coordination. So if there is one part of the political parties who slams the door of the negotiations, what can we do? Nevertheless, even if they slammed the door of the negotiations, the French state kept calling everyone for discussion in Paris, in Nouméa, our government went so many times to Nouméa to discuss. And even now, we are ready to discuss. So that's the plea that I made on behalf of the French government, a plea for dialogue. Also, most welcome to UN whenever they want to visit. And that's what was reported in the conclusions, in proceedings of the seminar. The fact that dialogue was still on the table, provided that everyone was ready for dialogue. As far as the French state is concerned, our door is open. We are welcoming everyone for dialogue in Paris or in Nouméa. It's up to everyone to join for the dialogue. And if I may add a personal note, everyone is saying that this unrest has been called for because they were not listened to by the French state. Well, what I want to say is that the Nouméa Agreement has enabled everyone in New Caledonia to have a representation in the French National Assembly and in the Senate. And it is up to all the parties, including the independentists, who have some representatives in the National Assembly and in the Senate, to use their political power to convince everyone in the National Assembly and in the Parliament. If they don't manage, it is an amazingly unacceptable way of voicing their concerns through violence, because the unrest in New Caledonia is absolutely unacceptable and is provoked by very specific parts of the Caledonian establishment.
Next week, Papua New Guinea parliamentarians are expected to debate a motion of no confidence in the government of James Marape. The motion was first proffered back in February, but the government deferred that sitting until next week. Don Wiseman spoke to our PNG correspondent Scott Waide about the issues leading to the motion and asked him if it was likely to go ahead as expected.
I've just spoken to the opposition leader. He's pretty confident that it will go ahead and the motion will be filed on the 28th. He's been informed by the Speaker to have that motion filed in Parliament. Currently, the opposition has 20 members, but as you know, in PNG politics, 24 hours is a very big amount of time, so anything can happen in the last 24 hours. And he's also said that the government has maintained that it has 56 members, even though there have been MPs who have expressed their desire to leave and have said that they will resign. The official resignation letters haven't reached the political parties registry office yet. So in effect, they remain members of PANGU. One MP, James Nomane, has come out and said that he doesn't really care that his official resignation hasn't gone, and he has left PANGU as he said earlier. The other MP who earlier said that he had resigned was Kite Duhu. Though also his letter hasn't gone to the political parties registry. So political parties registry has come out and stated that there are irregularities with the process, and that needs to be complied with.
So is there going to be nitpicking about whether or not they've officially resigned before they're able to vote for the opposition?
That definitely will come about, and it's already started because got on the front page of the National, the political parties registry already raising that concern. And that may be one piece of ammunition that will be used by the government to challenge the validity of the vote of no confidence next week.
Now, Rainbow Paita, he clearly was a very senior member of the government, but he's been disgruntled for a fair while. He voiced concern back at the beginning of the year. He's also said he's with the Marape government through and through, but where is he standing right now?
Yeah, in recent weeks, the issue of contention that has come to the fore has been the Gold Cooperation Bill, which Rainbow Paita has been a sponsor of. Now, there have been concerns raised both within the opposition about his conduct and the manner in which he's trying to push forward the 500-page bill to Parliament. There's also concern outside of Parliament from organizations like Transparency International, the Central Bank, and various other parties as well about that. Now, the key thing with this bill is that there's also disagreements within Cabinet itself. MPs within Cabinet, members of Cabinet have raised concerns about the bill and the manner in which, the bill in its present form, firstly, and the manner in which this bill is being pushed through Parliament. So if there's an instance where Rainbow Paita has decided to pull out, this will be the deciding factor.
It does seem like a very unusual issue to hang your political hat on, doesn't it?
Yeah, it is the unpredictable nature of PNG politics, you know.
All right, back in February, when this motion of no confidence was first mooted, the person being touted as the possibility for Prime Minister was Alan Bird. Is he still in the running?
He is still in the running as far as I know. There's been a lot of rumour mongering on social media, on WhatsApp, about Rainbow Paita putting his hand up or being a likely candidate for Prime Minister. He's an influential minister in government, and if he were to defect or move to one side outside as a third party outside of the opposition and the government, that would change the dynamics altogether.
What sort of number of MPs might he take with him?
I can't say at this stage, but he would be able to create a few waves.
He wouldn't be on his own?
No.
So, do you think there'll be a change of government next week?
Let me say this. There's a lot of dissatisfaction with the Pangu-led government, but if Pangu were to survive this vote of no confidence, they will barely make it, and it'll be a difficult challenge going into the next week. But having said that, if they go through this and survive this, there will have to be a lot of adjustment within Pangu ranks.
A Pacific professor says the Fiji military pointing fingers at Fijian police reflects widespread concern over corruption within the force. It comes after the Fiji military colonel Kitsione Tuinausara made damning remarks towards the government and police in response to Fiji's escalating drug crisis during a talanoa on Friday where media were present. Minister for Home Affairs Bio Tikonduadua released a statement calling for patience, adding the government plans to roll out a national countering illicit narcotics strategy and were yet to choose a dedicated police commissioner to handle the national drug issue. Elisha Foon spoke with Adjunct Professor of Governance from the University of the South Pacific, Vijay Naidu, on why he thinks guns are not the solution and his response to the military criticising the police and Fijian government.
Military and the use of guns won't solve the problem, and it is likely to worsen the situation because use of weapons in this case is likely to lead to a situation akin to what you have in Jamaica. So, thank goodness we don't live close to the United States and the civilian population doesn't have guns. But, if you are using the gun for dealing with the drug problem, then it's likely that you might lose some of these guns and it goes into the wrong hands.
Do you find it unusual that the military is calling out the police and the government in this circumstance?
Well, the thing is that we have this imposed constitution, and the Section 131 actually gives powers to the military for the security and well-being of all citizens, which actually should be, the imperative of our elected government and parliament. But, in the 2013 imposed constitution, we went back to this provision that was imposed in 1990 and which had been taken out of the 1997 constitution. So as it stands, the military actually feels empowered to say these sort of things and to criticize the government. And in my view, what should be discussed in private is actually being discussed through the media, which, has got, in my view, again, negative consequences. So while it is true that the problem itself has been festering for some time, and unfortunately elements of the police force are not only incompetent but also corrupt, with police involved in the drug-related activities and confiscated drugs actually disappearing from police stations. This is indeed a challenge, and I think the military is voicing suppose an increasingly widespread concern.
I guess, is it widely known the extent of police corruption? You mentioned drugs being taken from police stations. What evidence is there for this?
No, it's not rumors. It's actually true. And part of the problem is not something that happened yesterday, but an ongoing problem, because after each coup, the military has appointed its own personnel as commissioners of police. And of course, how policemen are trained, policemen and women are trained, what are the sort of requirements of enforcing the law with respect to a civilian population is very different from military training. And at the margins, there might be some overlap, but actually they're quite different. And so imposing military types of people on top of the police force has actually led over time to a demoralization of the police and a weakening of the police institutions, with a lot of senior policemen actually leaving and inadequately trained officers taking over. And these officers are also quite inexperienced. So actually, while the military is pointing fingers at the police force, there is to look at it going a bit of the recent history, which shows that, commissioners of police have actually been military officers.
Is this the start of murmurings of a potential coup? What is your take on it?
Well, I think, regrettably, we have had coups in 87, 2 of them, and again in 2000, and again in 2006. And, people are generally, uncomfortable with this kind of conversation where military comes up and makes, strongly worded suggestions or criticisms. And this is because of what's happened in the past. And so in the Fijian psyche, there is this concern that, that the gunmen will appear again and put the politicians under detention, and we have another round of dictatorship. And that's always been a kind of worrying concern. Having said that, there are also elements in the population who would like to have a stronger government, strong arm tactics, but I don't think that's the solution. And just to add what I said earlier on, if you look at what Rodrigo Duterte did in the Philippines with regard to his handling of the drug issue there, I don't think that's right for us to even contemplate. Like all the other issues we are in Fiji, it's a case of one step forward and a few backwards. So there were dedicated drug units in Fiji. There was a Asian kind of police unit, that existed but got disbanded under Bainimarama. And so, there is no long-term consistency in, making policies and enabling police, having specialist units. And the business of turning to Australia and New Zealand is a good one. And I think they should push that and get the necessary support to build the capacity locally.
RNZ Pacific has approached Fiji Police for comment. That's Pacific Waves for today. To listen back, head over to rnz.co.nz/Pacific. We're also on Spotify, Apple and iHeartRadio. From myself and the RNZ Pacific team, so far, 3-4.